I'm 65 years old. I moved to the city to live with my son during my retirement. Every night, exactly at 3 hours a.m., he would take a shower. One night, I couldn't resist my curiosity and peeked into the bathroom. What I saw there terrified me to the core of my soul. The next morning, I packed my bags and left for a senior living facility. My name is Margaret Hayes, though everyone back home calls me Maggie. For 37 years I taught English literature at Jefferson High School in a small town in upstate New York, where autumn smells like apple cider and wood smoke, and neighbors still wave from their porches. My little house on Maple Street knew me as a young bride, then a widow, and finally as a woman with silver streaks in her hair, who still reached for the tea kettle every morning at 6 sharp, just like I'd done my whole life. On the mantel sat a photo of my late husband, Robert. He stared out with that stern expression he wore like armor, as if even in death he expected obedience. Every time my eyes landed on that frame, two feelings twisted inside me: a distant pity for what we'd been, and a quiet relief that I no longer had to brace myself for the heavy footsteps in the hallway, or the slam of the door that meant his mood had turned dark. They say you should speak well of the dead, or say nothing at all. But bruises hidden under foundation, words that cut deeper than any belt, they don't disappear just because the man who caused them is 6 feet under. They just go quiet, waiting in the corners of your memory until something triggers them back to life. Robert was a brutal, controlling man. He treated Dylan and me like property, like things he owned. It all started the same year we got Dylan's acceptance letter to a good state university, and learned Robert had inoperable cancer. I swallowed every bit of anger and hurt, caring for him not out of love, but out of duty, so Dylan could study without having to drop out. When Robert finally closed his eyes for the last time, I didn't cry. I just felt something massive lift off my shoulders, something that had been crushing the air out of my lungs for decades. Dylan and I were left alone, mother and son, and I poured everything I had into pulling him through. Extra tutoring gigs at night, translating documents for spare cash, grading papers until 2 in the morning with cold tea and stale crackers for dinner. Dylan was smart and driven, but he had a temper. When his brow furrowed and his voice rose, that old animal fear would grip me. Here it comes, something's about to fly. I'd gently redirect him, talk him down, smooth over the rough edges in his personality, like I was sanding wood. I believed it would work. I believed my boy would grow out of it. And in many ways, he didn't disappoint. He graduated with honors, landed a position at a major firm, climbed the ranks fast, made regional manager by 32. He married a sweet, soft-spoken girl named Rebecca. Though everyone called her Becca, she and I took to each other right away, careful and kind in the way women are when they recognize something familiar in each other's eyes. Back then, I thought my hard years were behind me. I pictured quiet mornings in my garden, tending tomatoes and zinnias, evening walks around the pond with the neighbor ladies, talking about nothing important while the world rolled on without us. But life has a way of laughing at your plans. I was kneeling in the garden, dirt under my fingernails, and the scent of fresh earth in the air, when my phone rang. "Mom, what are you doing?" Dylan's voice carried that edge it always did, even in a simple greeting, like everything was an emergency that required immediate action. I wiped my hands on my apron and smiled to myself. "Oh, just checking on the tomatoes. They're almost ready. What's going on, honey?" "Becca and I have been talking. Pack your things. I'm coming this weekend to bring you to the city. You'll live with us." I froze, trowel in hand. The thought of leaving this house, this garden, the morning mist over the creek, made my heart feel like a stone. "Oh, Dylan, I don't think that's necessary. I'm fine here. I know everyone, and you two are busy with work. I'd just be in the way with my jars of preserves and herb tea." "You won't be in the way, Mom?" Impatience already creeping into his tone. "A son should take care of his mother. What if something happens to you? Who would even know? I've decided. The room's ready. Don't argue." That phrase, "I've decided," hit me like ice water. That's how Robert used to talk. I gathered myself and tried again. Softer. Dylan, sweetheart, I'm too old for big changes like this. I don't know anyone in the city. I'll go stir crazy without my garden and my friends. What friends? He snapped. Becca will take you to the store, take you for walks. You'll talk to her yourself right now. Before I could respond, Becca's voice came through, warm and gentle like bathwater. Mom, Maggie, please come, stay with us. The apartment's beautiful and bright, and we miss you. Dylan worries about you all the time. I'd love to spend time with you, take you shopping, sit and talk. Please? Her kindness made it hard to say no, but I heard something underneath it. Surrender. This wasn't her idea. This was Dylan's decision, and she was just holding out her hand to smooth it over, the way women like us learn to do. I was silent for a long time, torn between the freedom I'd fought so hard for, and the old instinct to comply when a man's voice got that tone. Finally, I sighed. All right, give me a couple days to get organized. Perfect, Becca said brightly. We'll be there this weekend. I hung up and stood in my garden, listening to the wind rustle through the dried dill stalks, and wondered if I was making a terrible mistake. The weekend came too fast. Dylan pulled up in a black Mercedes S-Class, the paint so glossy it looked wet. He stepped out in an expensive suit, flashed a confident smile, and immediately started loading my things: suitcases, quilts, jars of homemade jam, my favorite books, the old photo album. Becca was with him, delicate and smiling, one of those women who does everything quickly and quietly, so as not to inconvenience anyone. Mom, look. Dylan popped the trunk. I bought you premium vitamins, imported. Top quality. Oh, Dylan, you didn't need to spend money on that. I'm fine. He waved me off. Money isn't the problem, Mom. Time is. I'll feel better knowing you're nearby and looked after. The highway carried us away from my little house, that smelled of apples and damp earth, toward a city where glass and concrete grew taller than trees. We entered an upscale residential complex and took the elevator to the 18th floor. The apartment greeted us with gleaming hardwood, heavy furniture, and a silence so thick it rang in my ears. This is your room. Dylan swung open the door to a bright bedroom, with a view of a green park below. He set the air conditioner remote on the nightstand, patted the television like it was an old friend. If you need anything, just tell Becca. Thank you, kids, I said. And I meant it. They knew how to make everything look right. Becca efficiently unpacked my dresses into the closet, laid fresh linens on the bed, hung up my clothes, glancing at me every few seconds to make sure I wasn't upset. But I noticed that whenever Dylan walked past, her smile tightened like a rubber band, stretched too far, and a flicker of caution passed through her eyes. I looked away. I didn't want to see what I might recognize. That first dinner was generous. Becca had prepared a feast. Fish, salads, a pot of soup. Dylan talked about projects, competition, keeping people motivated. And he spoke with such authority that even the air seemed to listen and nod. Mom, eat more. You're too thin. He dropped a piece of fish on my plate. I can serve myself, honey, I said. But he'd already turned to his wife. Becca, why are you just sitting there? Pour Mom some soup. He didn't raise his voice, but the command was clear. Becca flinched, grabbed the ladle quickly, and her hand trembled just enough that the spoon clinked against the bowl. I smiled at her the way old teachers do. Calm, supportive. Thank you, sweetheart. It's delicious. That night, I couldn't sleep. The apartment hummed with a different life. Elevators breathed somewhere deep in the building. Outside, strings of headlights stretched into the distance. The city droned beneath us like a sleeping giant. I sat on the bed, smoothing the coverlet, trying to convince myself that people can get used to anything if they're healthy enough. The first few days passed smoothly enough. In the mornings after Dylan left for work, Becca would take my arm and walk me to the farmer's market. She wouldn't let me carry bags, asked what I liked, kept saying, Mom, you rest today. Sometimes we'd stop by the mall, and she'd pick out a cardigan for me. "This cream color looks beautiful on you." I'd mumble that my old clothes were still perfectly good. Dylan checked on me every evening. "How's your blood pressure? Are you using the monitor? You need to check it morning and night. Becca, write down the numbers in a notebook." He spoke with care and concern, and I felt foolish for being uneasy, like I was imagining problems that weren't there. But the longer I watched, the more I caught that tension in Becca's movements, the kind that doesn't exist in a woman who feels truly safe. The hesitation when she set down a cup, the eyes dropping to the floor when he passed. The smile that tried too hard to be perfect. I said nothing. We old folks sometimes jump to conclusions, and I was so afraid of being wrong that I chose to wait and watch, the way you wait for winter at the end of a long fall. A week passed. Then, too, I learned their rhythms, who came and went when, where the towels were kept, how to work the dishwasher. The city evenings became a bit more familiar, my sleep a little less fractured. I almost believed the unease would dissolve on its own, like sugar in tea if you don't stir too loudly. And then, on the quietest night, when it seemed the whole building had fallen asleep, exactly at 3:00 a.m., water suddenly roared through the wall next to my bed. That night, I woke to a strange, thick silence, so complete I could hear the clock ticking off seconds. And precisely at 3, like clockwork, water thundered through the wall beside my bed, powerful and steady, like someone had cranked the faucet all the way open. Who would do that? I thought. It's the middle of the night. People are sleeping. I lay there listening, afraid to get up and startle someone by opening my door. After 15 minutes, the water stopped, just as abruptly, and the apartment fell back into its hollow, library-like quiet. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I twisted in bed, staring at the window where occasional headlights flickered. In the morning I sat at breakfast and tried to act normal. "Dylan, honey," I couldn't help but notice. Around 3 this morning, the water was running, like someone was taking a shower. He was scrolling through his phone, eyes down. "Yeah, nothing, Mom. Work stress. Couldn't sleep, so I got up, rinsed off, and went back to bed." "Don't worry about it," said so casually, like it was nothing. Then Becca came in, carrying oatmeal. For a split second, she froze, the spoon nearly clattering against the bowl. Then she quickly recovered and smiled. "Yes, Mom." He gets so tired. Sometimes he gets up at night, cools off, and feels better. I nodded, but I caught that momentary freeze and something inside me twinged. Not right. 2 nights later, again at exactly 3, the water, like a metronome, ticking off my worry. And then silence. I lay there before 3 even arrived, catching every creak, every rustle, until sleep broke apart into fragments, and my eyes felt full of sand in the morning. I started watching them more closely. Dylan during the day seemed normal, put together, sharp, but with exhaustion and irritation simmering underneath. Little things set him off faster. Becca flitted around the house, speaking sweetly, but her eyes stayed down when he was near, and her hands were always busy, as if standing still might be dangerous. I decided to speak to him, adult to adult, while there was still time for words. I picked a moment when Becca was in the kitchen, and Dylan and I were alone in the living room. "Sit down, son," I said. "Listen to me calmly. I understand work is stressful, but showering in the middle of the night isn't a joke. 3 in the morning is when your body is most vulnerable. You could catch a cold, mess up your blood pressure, strain your heart. You're young, you have your whole life ahead. Take care of yourself. Please, you can't keep doing this." I spoke like a mother, gently, almost pleading. His face changed instantly, like someone flipped a switch. "Mom, mind your own retirement, and stay out of it. I'll handle my own life." He stood up and walked to his room, closing the door. Not loudly, but firmly enough to make it clear the conversation was over. From that day, the air in the apartment felt heavier. He barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was short and cold, like I was a stranger. I went quiet too, not out of hurt but out of caution. Because I knew this kind of cold, it never led anywhere good. That's when I started really watching Becca. We were chopping salad one afternoon. She reached for a basket on the top shelf, and as her sleeve rode up, I saw it, a bruise on her wrist. An ugly mix of blue and yellow, the kind that comes from fingers gripping too hard. I took her hand gently. Becca, honey, what's this? She jerked back, tugging her sleeve down fast. Oh, Mom, it's nothing. I bumped into the table. My skin bruises so easily. Her eyes darted away, her voice rushing ahead like it was trying to outrun the truth. I knew that mark. I knew it too well. But pushing her to admit it would only drive the lie deeper. Be careful, sweetheart, I said quietly. A woman has to know how to protect herself. She nodded and slipped out of the kitchen. A couple days later, she came out in the morning with swollen eyelids. I asked, didn't sleep well? Mosquito. She smiled weakly. Bit me on the balcony. On the 18th floor. With screens? I didn't say it out loud. Words sometimes just break what's already cracking. And all of this kept pulling me back to that 3 a.m. water. I remembered my own past life, like someone clutching an old, long discarded scarf, and I tried to push the memories away. But deep down, my thoughts had already formed a single conclusion. Those 3 o'clock showers weren't random. This was about something else, something far darker than just cooling off. But what I was about to discover would be worse than anything I'd imagined. Because sometimes the monsters we think we've buried don't really die. They just wait, hiding in the people we love most. The night the water started again, sharp and icy and relentless, I couldn't just lie there anymore. I sat up in bed, waited a few seconds for my heart to stop hammering, pulled on my robe, carefully pressed down on the door handle, and stepped into the hallway. A strip of light from under the bathroom door fell across the dark floor, and beneath the rush of water, I heard something else, a short choked sob and a low, angry whisper. I took another step, and saw it. The bathroom door wasn't fully closed, left open just a crack, as if someone had been in a hurry, and hadn't pulled it shut. I stopped at the edge, like standing on ice, holding onto the wall, and leaned closer to the gap, and I saw Dylan stood in his pajamas, soaked through, hair plastered to his forehead. In front of him was Becca, also drenched. Her thin nightgown clung to her shoulders, and cold water poured from the showerhead. I could feel the metallic chill of it from where I stood. It smelled like metal and night. He held her by her hair at the base of her skull, gripping it like a rein. Her head was tilted back, neck exposed, a thin stream running down her collarbone. He wasn't yelling, he was whispering, the kind of whisper that makes everything in the room lose sound. You open your mouth again, you understand? The words dropped like stones into water. Then suddenly, a slap, dry, sharp, ringing off the tile through the noise. Becca swayed, her knees buckled, but he didn't let go. He pulled her higher toward the stream, and she let out a soft whimper, the way people cry when crying isn't allowed. I felt something inside me snap, some thin thread that had been holding my voice together. The air turned thick, my hands felt foreign. And while my mind tried to process that this was my son, the boy I'd raised, another layer of memory was already moving on its own track. An old yard, a rain barrel, an evening when my husband, still alive, grabbed me by the hair and shoved my face into freezing water. That same white light in my eyes, gasping, fingers clawing uselessly at the wet metal edge. I heard my own choked whisper from 30 years ago. Quiet, don't let the child hear. I didn't go in. I didn't scream. My body decided for me, like there was an old panic button still wired inside. Run! I backed away, tiptoed back to my room, shut the door, and collapsed onto the bed. I pulled the covers over my head like a creature hiding in its burrow. When there's a shadow overhead, my heart pounded so hard, I thought the sound would escape from under the blanket and run down the hall. The water kept running behind the wall, steady and long, and that sound became the soundtrack to our family's nightmare. Not loud, but relentless. The tears didn't come right away. First, There was cold, the kind you get after a bad scare when your teeth find each other on their own. Then shame. Not for hiding but for seeing in my own son the ghost of the man I thought I'd buried with hospital paperwork and a final breath. I thought the demon died when the morgue door closed behind his gurney. Turns out, no. It just moved into another body. One painfully familiar. I lay there and cried silently, without sound, not just for Becca, or even for my younger self, but for all those evenings with concealer, and the lie about falling off a bike, for the late-night grating with ice pressed to my cheek, for the boy I'd explained everything to, and smoothed over, thinking he'll grow out of it, he'll be fine. He didn't grow out of it. When the water finally stopped, the silence felt even heavier, like a bucket of coal. I lay there motionless until dawn, and with the first light filtering through the window, thin as notebook paper, a clarity washed over me. The kind they call after. Inside, everything lined up simply, like arithmetic. I couldn't change Dylan. I wouldn't break through his rage. Couldn't survive a second life like I'd survived the first. I wouldn't stand between him and the woman beside him, because when you step between, the blow lands on both of you anyway. All I could do was leave. Leave, while I was still breathing. I got up, washed my face. Looked at myself in the mirror. A woman with silver streaks. Eyes not filled with fear, but with something solid. Like a crack in glass on a frozen day. Visible, but holding. In the kitchen I put water on, made oatmeal, set the table. Everything normal, as if routine could hold this house together. My hands did the simple tasks, while my mind raced ahead. Where? How? What to say? What to pack? What to leave? Who to warn? Senior living facility. The phrase that used to make me feel embarrassed now sounded calm, like the name of a train station where the next train was waiting. Dylan came out first, fresh and composed, like the night had never happened. Becca followed a little later. Subdued, eyes down, a faint yellowish line at her temple under powder. I felt my voice rise from my chest, quiet but firm, the kind a teacher uses when a classroom needs to stop with just one sentence. I sat across from them, placed my palms flat on the table so they wouldn't shake, and lifted my eyes. Kids, I said, and paused. I need to tell you something. They glanced at each other, as if they hadn't heard correctly. I thought about it all night. I'm moving to a senior living facility. Dylan recovered first. His face went red in patches. His voice turned metallic. What do you mean moving? Why? You have a son, you have everything here. You want people saying I abandoned my mother? No, I don't allow it. This is my life, I answered calmly. And my last years, I want to spend them in a way that's easier for me. You and Becca will have more freedom, and I'll have more peace. It's my decision. He clenched his jaw, tapped his fingers on the table like knocking on a lid, and stared past me like I was invisible. Becca's eyes shot up suddenly, like she'd been jolted. Mom, if I did something to offend you, please don't go. Her voice cracked. You didn't do anything, sweetheart, I said, touching her hand. It's just that the city doesn't suit me. These facilities nowadays are like resorts. Book clubs, chess, gardens. You can visit me on weekends. That'll be enough for me. Dylan kept trying to argue about shame, about what people would say, about how he'd already arranged everything, circling the same ground over and over. I listened silently, letting him exhaust himself, and then repeated, I've decided. In my voice was that firmness children recognize in their mothers when argument is no longer possible. By lunchtime, everything was arranged. He called an expensive facility on the city's edge himself, booked a room, ordered a car. He looked businesslike, detached, like someone solving a problem rather than saying goodbye to his mother. I packed a small suitcase, the same dresses, 2 books, the album. At the door I turned back. The apartment was beautiful, everything gleaming, but cold as a train station in winter. I looked at my son. Nothing remained of the boy in the photographs, just the shell. I looked at Becca, pale, thin, standing by the door. her gaze like someone who has no right to call out. I nodded at her. Hang in there. She lowered her eyes. The senior living facility welcomed me with smooth pathways, steady routines, and steady care. No one yelled there. Doors didn't slam, and most importantly, at 3 a.m., no one turned on the shower. Morning exercises, then breakfast with new acquaintances, then the library with lamps under green glass shades. In the afternoons, the garden, benches, warm sun on my shoulders. My body, strangely enough, calmed down quickly. My soul didn't. Every time I closed my eyes, that slap echoing through the rush of water surfaced from the depths, dragging everything with it. My old bruises. The concealer. The whisper, don't let the child hear. And Becca, soaked, her wet hair held like reins. I sat on a bench and thought, I escaped. But what about her? One afternoon, while I was in the garden crushing a dry marigold bloom between my fingers, I heard, "Excuse me, are you Margaret Hayes?" The English teacher. I looked up and instantly recognized Dorothy Richardson, my old colleague who'd retired a few years before me. She'd barely changed. Same warm smile, lively eyes. We hugged, laughed at the unexpected meeting, talked over each other asking about health, kids, the school. For a moment, it felt lighter, like I was back in the teacher's lounge with mugs of tea and endless talk about our students. A young woman with delicate features and tired eyes approached us. "Mom, I brought you some fruit." "This is my Sarah," Dorothy introduced her. "Sarah, say hello to Margaret." Sarah smiled politely, set down the bag, said goodbye, and left quickly. I watched her walk away and saw in her shoulders that same strange gentleness I'd seen in Becca, that same quiet, too perfect smile. "Don't you think," I said carefully, "your Sarah looks exhausted?" Dorothy sighed like she was letting go of heavy air. "You saw it right away, Margaret. Your face today looks like you're carrying something very heavy. And the quiet here doesn't seem to be helping." Her words landed exactly right. I felt everything I'd been holding inside start pulling toward the surface. We walked to a far bench, where bushes hid us from the path, and I told her everything. No embellishments, no inventions, the way we teach kids to write honest essays. The upscale apartment, the midnight showers, Becca, the slap, my steps backward, my escape to the facility. I spoke, and she listened without interrupting, only stroking my hand like smoothing wrinkled paper. When I finished, her eyes held no judgment, only compassion and a certain clarity. "You've lived through too much pain," she said, "and you still found the strength to say it out loud." "Margaret," she sighed, "what you saw, it's like what happened to my Sarah." And she told me about her daughter, an educated, calm husband. First words, then shoves, then fists. For a long time, Dorothy thought you had to endure. Marriage is work. A man needs peace. But one day, when Sarah came home with a bruise and empty eyes, not sad or angry but burned out, she understood that endurance isn't medicine. It's a smokescreen behind which someone does whatever they want. "I cried," she said. "I begged my daughter's forgiveness for my blindness and said enough. We went to a lawyer, started gathering everything we could. There was a trial, it was hard, but Sarah is free now." She fell silent, giving me the right to sit quietly beside her. The silence settled between us, smooth as the path. "Margaret," she finally said, gently but firmly, "your daughter-in-law is someone's child. She was raised, protected, just like your son. Imagine if her parents saw your husband's grandson near that rain barrel. You're a mother, but you're also a woman. If you can't change your son's mind, you have another choice. Stand beside her, not instead of her. Beside her. Help her leave. Help her live." Every word hit me accurately, painfully, and correctly. I nodded, then honestly said what I was ashamed of. "I'm afraid, Dorothy. Still afraid. Like it all happened yesterday." "I understand," she answered. "And precisely because you understand better than anyone, you can't stay on the sidelines. Fear doesn't leave because you hide. It leaves when you go where you're scared and do what's right. We sat a while longer in silence. The garden rustled with leaves. Someone laughed somewhere. Life around us went on as usual. And somehow that made it calmer. I wiped my eyes and took Dorothy's hand. Thank you. I know what I have to do. That evening, back in my room, I pulled out an old address book, found a pen between the pages, held it in my fingers until they stopped shaking, and wrote on a clean page, Michael Preston, attorney. I looked at the written letters, took a deep breath, pulled the phone toward me, and dialed the first number. Michael Preston answered almost immediately. His voice was calm, professional, no unnecessary emotion. We met in his office. Stacks of files, a green lamp, the glass in the frame trembling slightly from street noise. I told him everything like a teacher at a staff meeting, no decorations, in order. He listened, asked short clarifying questions, took notes. We need evidence, he said finally. No emotion, just facts. Will you help her? We'll manage. A few days later, Becca came to the facility with a large basket of fruit and a smile held together by effort. We sat on that same bench in the garden where the shade was thick and people didn't pass by. I took her hands and told her the truth. I saw. She tried at first to object with hurried words, the usual defense, but then she broke. She cried the way people rarely cry, when there's not a single thread left in your voice to hold on to with your last strength. I stayed silent, hugged her, waited for the pain to release itself. When she'd exhausted herself, I started speaking calmly, step by step, about how we'd move forward. Listen and do exactly as I say, I told her. First, any insults or threats, turn on your phone's recorder. Don't argue, don't provoke. Second, any mark, even a small one, photograph it immediately in daylight. Note the date and time. Send it straight to me, at a hidden email. Only we know the password. Third, keep a journal, brief bullet points. Day, time, what he said, what he did, who was present. Fourth, documents. Anything showing income and assets, contracts, statements, records. Don't steal or break anything. Just carefully make copies when they're lying out in the open. Becca flinched. What if he notices? Be careful, I answered. Freedom rarely comes without a price, but you're not alone. I'm here, and the lawyer is here. We talked through the last hardest part. In the end, you'll say the word divorce, I said. Your job is not to argue or explain. Say it, and leave. Come to me, or to a friend. I'll call a taxi, meet you at the gate. After that, the adults take over. She nodded. For the first time in a long while, I saw in her eyes not just fear but determination. Long days began. Becca sent photos to the hidden email. Narrow yellow-blue marks on her wrist, temple, shoulder. Short audio files with Dylan's cold, cutting voice. Every word aimed at her weakest points. Dry journal entries like police reports. Came home at 1:30. Lost his temper. Smashed a cup. Shoved me. 7:10 p.m. Forbade me from calling mom. Sometimes scans of documents came through. I forwarded everything to Michael Preston. He'd reply briefly, received, and even more rarely, good. I walked through the garden with my phone like holding a pulse in my palm. Every new message was simultaneously a knife and a step forward. Enough evidence accumulated. One morning, a short message came. Mom, I'm telling him tonight. I couldn't settle all day. In my room, I paced while shadows flickered outside the window. By evening, I just sat on the bed, staring at the phone. Around 10 it rang. Becca's number. Hello, sweetheart. How are you? I asked, barely touching my lips to the words. I told him. Her voice shook. Then I heard only crashing screaming, muffled. Give me the phone. The line went dead. I called again and again. Silence. Half an hour later the phone rang. But, from Dylan's number, I answered. Mom, he said in a cold, alien voice. Who gave you the right to interfere? You turned her against me? You think you'll destroy my family? No. From now on, she's not going anywhere, and she won't see you again. Click. Silence. I don't remember how I found the right numbers. My hand automatically found Michael Preston's contact. Emergency, I said, and my voice was calm like during a fire drill at school. He's locked her in. He's threatening her. We need to act now. What happened next moved fast, like a diagram. Police report, dispatch, door forced open. Becca in the apartment, terrified, with fresh marks. Doctor, documentation of injuries. Temporary safe location. Only the lawyer knew the address. Papers went into the case file. Becca went into silence, where you could sleep without jerking awake. I knew this was only the beginning. Papers aren't peace yet. Dylan wasn't the type to back down. I prepared myself for him to call, or come. And 2 days later, exactly when the garden smelled of fresh-cut grass and bees hummed lazily, he appeared at the facility gate. He walked in like entering an office, quick and hard in a suit, but wrinkled, with red eyes. He found me in the garden, didn't say hello, just dove straight in. Mom, what are you doing? At your age, pulling this? You destroyed my family. I closed my book and set it calmly on the bench. Families aren't destroyed by those who pull people out of trouble, I said. They're destroyed by those who push them into it. This is my personal business. I'm raising my wife. A woman needs to know her place. You, as a woman, should understand. He spoke quietly, but with that cold confidence that makes the leaves in the bushes rustle. Violence isn't discipline, I answered. It's a crime. If there's anything human left in you, stop and ask Becca for forgiveness. Now, while there's still time. He smirked. For what? I provide. Nice apartment. Good life. All she had to do was sit at home quietly and obey. But you coached her. Remember this. If you keep helping her, we're done. Consider yourself without a son. The pity inside. The kind any mother feels. But the words had been said, and I knew the cost of that cost. Then that's how it'll be, I said calmly. He leaned closer. And don't dream about the divorce going through. I'll hire the best lawyers. I'll prove she's unstable, that she's got issues. She won't get a dime. And if there's a kid, she won't see it. Understand? He turned and left, leaving behind the smell of expensive cologne, and an emptiness where birds sang louder than usual. Then began what always lasts longer than life itself. Papers, hearings, motions. Michael Preston held the line firmly, without emotion. Dylan hired expensive lawyers, sharp and tenacious. They called our audio recordings, edited, the photos of bruises, self-inflicted injuries, the medical report consequences of a fall. They brought in a questionable doctor with a stamp, claiming Becca had a disorder, and was prone to dramatization. I sat on the bench in the back and listened, as strange mouths tried to turn pain into paper dust. Becca held herself together, but by the end of each session, she quietly twisted the edge of her handkerchief. Her fingers went white. At night, I'd call her, talk about breathing and honey tea, the way I used to talk to girls before exams. And then I'd stare at the dark window for a long time, while the green light on the router blinked like a heartbeat on a monitor. The case was stuck. The judge frowned more often, talking about insufficiency and contradictions. It felt like just a bit more, and everything would slide into that dreaded unproven. On one of those evenings, my phone buzzed, and I saw Becca's name. Mom? Her voice was hoarse and immediately agitated. We have hope. The neighbors, the building across the street. They recently installed a new camera system. A good one. One of them faces directly at our floor, at the hallway. That evening when he was dragging me. It's all visible, clear. Everything. I sat up like I'd been pushed. You're sure? The neighbor was reviewing footage today. Saw us, called me. I already contacted Michael Preston. He's going to them now. Mom, she cried and laughed at the same time. You can see every movement. His hand in my hair, his words. Everything. Michael and I met late that night at the neighbor's building entrance. Serious faces, a folder. Conversations in short phrases. Michael checked the timestamp, obtained a certified copy, called the police officer for documentation, arranged the transfer by the book, so not a single detail could fall apart in court later. On the phone screen, the narrow hallway of our 18th floor, light from a cold lamp, and figures. Dylan jerking Becca. Another yank. His lips moving, words readable even without sound. "We're filing tomorrow," the lawyer said. "Motion to include the evidence and copy to the investigators. Let them try to call this self-harm." The night was almost morning, the kind when the sky's already lightening, but birds aren't sure it's time yet. I returned to the facility, sat on the bed, and folded my hands like in school. Give me strength. In the morning, Becca and I met at the courthouse doors. She was pale, but her gaze was steady. Michael Preston brought out a flash drive and printed stills, said briefly, "Your Honor, video recording from a common area of the neighboring building. We request immediate viewing." The judge nodded. The clerk moved a small speaker closer to the monitor, turned on the screen. On the black rectangle, the hallway of our floor lit up. Date and time at the bottom. The elevator doors opened, and two people tumbled out. Dylan holding Becca by the hair. A yank, a slap, another yank, and lips moving, threats readable even without sound. The courtroom fell so quiet that the creak of a chair sounded like thunder. Dylan's lawyers exchanged glances. Someone's hand with a pen trembled. The judge, watching the monitor, stayed silent for a long time, then said shortly, "Admitted." The lawyer nodded. "And I request a copy be sent to investigative authorities." After that, everything rolled down a different track. The defense lowered their tone, the self-harm papers immediately dulled, and to avoid criminal charges, Dylan was advised to settle. He agreed quickly, the way people used to calculating risks do. The court decision came out clear. Divorce, division of jointly acquired property, 50-50, plus compensation for harm to health. Significant, not symbolic. The day we received the certified copy with the stamp, Becca cried. But these were tears without fear. Only exhaustion leaving the body like fever after illness. Life afterward unfolded without violence. Becca bought a small, bright apartment in another neighborhood. Windows facing the courtyard. Morning sun in the kitchen. On the windowsill, we planted basil, and it immediately smelled like home. First thing, she came for me. Not to take me away permanently, but just to sit together on a stool and drink tea, the way women do who've survived a storm and made it to shore. "Mom," she said, hugging me tight, "if it weren't for you—" "Don't say that," I answered, stroking her hair. "You saved yourself. Someone just happened to be there to reach out a hand at the right time." We drank tea, were quiet for a long time, and the silence wasn't empty but kind. Then Becca blushed, her cheeks turned pink. She lowered her eyes and, like a girl, placed her hand on her stomach. "I have one more news. It seems fate took pity on us. It's been over 2 months already." At first I didn't understand. Then I understood and laughed through tears. When a person walks out of a cage, suddenly there's room in their life for a miracle, not a loud one, but a quiet, real one. The same woman they'd called barren, humiliated her for it, turned out to be a future mother. And it was so simple and so right, like life itself had decided to put a period for us. News of the pregnancy somehow reached Dylan. He started sending messages, calling, first to Becca, then to me, said he understood, that he'd been a monster. "Give me a chance. I'll fix everything." I listened to one such call all the way through and answered calmly, "That night, when you locked up a woman and beat her, chances ended. Don't call." Then, I blocked the number. Becca also said her firm no. Scars on the heart don't erase with one promise. She and I lived our own lives, but close by. I stayed at the facility. I already had friends there, a routine, a library where I knew which shelf held my favorite Thomas Hardy in the old translation. I visited Becca often. We picked out curtains, discussed where the crib would go, argued about swaddling clothes and onesies, walked around the courtyard and counted other people's windows. One day she took my hand, looked directly at me, and quietly asked, "Mom, my mother died a long time ago. Can I call you Mom, not just for my baby but for myself too?" So the child has a grandmother through mom, not on paper but in life? I nodded and couldn't hold back tears. Sometimes it happens. You lose a son and find a daughter, not blood, but closer, because chosen by the heart. Dylan disappeared from our lives. Not because we erased him like pencil marks, but because that's what grown people decided. And in that was respect not for him, but for ourselves. Maybe someday he'll understand that power isn't about holding someone by the hair and who allows whom what, but about the ability to stop. That's not my task anymore. Now my days go smoothly and simply. Morning exercises. Slow, no heroics. Knees and back know how to remind you about age. Then breakfast with neighbors, conversations. Who read what? Who thought up which flower bed? In the afternoon, the trip to Becca's. I'd take a pre-signed pass from the guard, put on my light shawl, and ride across half the city. Becca and I set the table, discuss the latest paperwork from the prenatal clinic, laugh about how much the little one loves to kick in the evening. I return to the facility, where my people meet me. We sit by the window, and someone always brings potato pies, like in the teacher's lounge. I often think about what the moral of this story is. Probably this: evil rarely leaves on its own. It must be stopped. And silence isn't neutrality, it's participation on the wrong side. Sometimes they demand we substitute concepts. Families are held together by endurance. No. Families are held together by respect and care. And where there's fear, family exists only in photographs. And one more thing: blood isn't always closer than choice. Those you're not afraid with become family. I'm 70 now, sitting in my small room at Willow Creek Senior Living, and through my window, I can see Becca's building, in the distance. In 3 months, I'll be a grandmother. Not by blood, but by something stronger. By choice. By courage. By love. Last week, Becca brought over paint samples for the nursery. We sat in the garden here, the same bench where Dorothy and I had our talk, and we held up the colors to the light. "What do you think, Mom? Soft yellow or mint green?" "Either one would be beautiful, sweetheart," I said. "What matters is that the baby grows up knowing they're safe. That's the only color that really counts." She smiled. That real smile I'd never seen in Dylan's apartment, the kind that reaches the eyes. "The baby will know," she said, "because they'll have you." I squeezed her hand, and we sat there as the afternoon sun warmed our shoulders and the breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass and late-blooming roses. Sometimes I wonder if I should feel guilty for choosing Becca over Dylan, for turning my back on my own flesh and blood. But then I remember that night. The sound of the water, the look in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. And I know that blood doesn't give you the right to harm. Love doesn't mean enabling cruelty. Family isn't about who you're related to. It's about who shows up when it's hard, who reaches out a hand, who says enough when everyone else turns away. Dorothy visits me every Thursday now. We play cards, drink weak coffee, and talk about our girls. Because that's what Sarah and Becca are to us now. Our girls, the daughters we chose, the daughters who chose us back. "You know what the best part is," Dorothy said last week, laying down a winning hand with a satisfied smile. "We didn't just save them, they saved us too, gave us a reason to be brave when we thought that part of our lives was over." She was right. At 65, I thought my story was finished, that all the important chapters had been written. I thought I'd just coast to the end, tending a garden I'd soon leave behind, watching life from the sidelines. Instead, I learned that courage doesn't have an expiration date, that it's never too late to do the right thing, that sometimes the most important battles we fight are the ones we thought we'd already lost. 3 months later, on a bright Tuesday morning in May, my phone rang at 4:47 a.m. Becca's voice, breathless, and laughing, and crying all at once. "Mom, she's here. Emma Grace. 7 pounds. 4 ounces. She has your eyes. I don't know how I got dressed so fast. The facility's night nurse called me a cab, and I rode through the empty city streets as dawn broke pink and gold over the buildings. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and new beginnings. Becca's room was on the 4th floor. When I walked in, she was propped up in bed, exhausted and radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a white blanket, with yellow ducks on it. "Mom," she whispered, "come meet your granddaughter." I walked over on shaky legs and looked down at the smallest person I'd ever seen. Emma Grace. Dark wispy hair, a perfect rosebud mouth, and eyes that looked up at me with that unfocused newborn gaze that still seems to see everything that matters. "Hello, little one," I said, my voice cracking. "I'm your grandma. I'm going to tell you stories and teach you to be brave and make sure you always know you're loved." Becca held up the baby toward me. "Want to hold her?" I sat in the chair beside the bed and took that warm, impossibly lightweight into my arms. Emma made a small sound, something between a sigh and a coo, and wrapped her tiny fingers around my thumb. And I thought about how life is strange and surprising and sometimes unbearably hard, but also how it gives you moments like this, unexpected gifts that make all the difficult parts worth it. I thought about Robert, dead for decades now, and how his violence had tried to echo through time, from him to Dylan, from Dylan to Becca, a poison passed down like an inheritance. But we'd stopped it. We'd broken the chain. This baby would grow up knowing gentle hands. She'd learn that love doesn't hurt, that power isn't about control, that real strength is knowing when to walk away, and when to stand firm. "Tell me about my daddy someday," Emma would ask when she was older. And Becca would have to decide what truth to tell, what mercy to show, but that was for later. For now there was just this, a new life, a new start, a grandmother and mother and baby, 3 generations of women, who'd learned that family isn't about who you're born to, it's about who's there when it counts. The morning sun streamed through the hospital window, painting everything gold. A nurse brought in breakfast trays. Becca ate like she was starving, which she probably was, and I held Emma and hummed old lullabies my own mother had sung to me before she died. "What are you singing?" Becca asked, smiling. "Something my mama used to sing. I barely remember the words, just the tune. Funny what stays with you." "Sing it too, Emma," Becca said. "Start her own tradition." So I did. I sang that half-remembered lullaby to my granddaughter, while Becca dozed and the city woke up outside, and I thought about how sometimes the best gift you can give someone isn't protection from pain. It's the courage to face it, the tools to survive it, and the promise that they won't have to do it alone. Dylan sent flowers to the hospital. Expensive ones, 2 dozen white roses, with a card that said, "Congratulations, I'd like to meet my daughter." Becca looked at them for a long time, then asked the nurse to give them to someone else. "Maybe someone who doesn't have any," she said quietly. "Someone who needs them more." She didn't cry. She'd cried enough. Now there was just clarity. "He can petition the court for visitation when she's older," Michael Preston had advised. "He might get supervised visits eventually, but you don't have to make it easy. The court will consider everything that happened. I just want her safe," Becca said, touching Emma's soft head. "That's all. I don't care about revenge or punishment or making him pay. I just want her to grow up without fear." And isn't that what every mother wants? What I'd wanted for Dylan and failed to give him because I'd taught him the wrong lessons, shown him the wrong example, let him see violence and called it love, called it family, called it just how things are. But I couldn't change the past. I could only shape what came next. That night, back in my room at the facility, I pulled out my old journal and wrote, "Today I became a grandmother, not by blood, but by choice. Emma Grace, born May 7th, 4:32 a.m. She has the whole world ahead of her, and this time, we'll teach her right. This time, the cycle ends. This time, love wins." I closed the journal and looked out my window at the city lights, flickering in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Dylan was alone in that big apartment. The one that had seemed so luxurious and was really just a pretty cage. Somewhere out there, he was probably angry, maybe grieving, possibly wondering how it all went so wrong. I hoped for his sake that someday he'd understand, that someday he'd look in the mirror and see what I'd seen that night through the bathroom door, and it would horrify him enough to change. But I wasn't holding my breath. Some people never learn. Some people just keep finding new victims, new ways to hurt, new excuses. All I could do was make sure Becca and Emma weren't among them. The weeks folded into months. Emma grew, hit her milestones, smiled and babbled and started sleeping through the night. I visited 3 times a week, holding her while Becca showered or napped or just sat with a cup of coffee and stared at nothing, decompressing from the constant vigilance of new motherhood. On Emma's 6-month birthday, we had a small party. Just us, Dorothy and Sarah, Michael Preston and his wife, a few neighbors Becca had befriended, pink balloons, a smash cake, too many presents. We sang Happy Birthday off-key, and Emma laughed and smeared frosting everywhere, and it was perfect. Speech, Dorothy called out. The grandma should say something. Everyone turned to look at me. I stood up, feeling my age in my knees, and looked around at these people who'd become family, not through blood, but through battle. I'm not good at speeches, I started, and everyone laughed because they knew that wasn't true. But I want to say thank you. Thank you to Becca for being brave enough to ask for help. Thank you to Michael for fighting for what's right. Thank you to Dorothy for showing me that it's never too late to do better. And thank you to this little girl who reminded us all what we're fighting for. I looked down at Emma in her high chair, covered in pink frosting, grinning her two-toothed grin. The world isn't always kind, I continued. It isn't always fair, but it's full of people like us, people who show up, who speak up, who won't look away when someone needs help. And as long as that's true, there's hope. As long as we keep fighting, keep choosing courage over comfort, keep protecting the vulnerable, the world gets a little bit better. I raised my glass of sparkling cider. To Emma. May she grow up surrounded by love, protected by courage, and may she never ever have to be as brave as her mother. But if she does, may she know she doesn't have to do it alone. Here, here. Everyone echoed, and we drank, and Emma banged her hands on the high chair tray and squealed with delight. Later, after everyone had gone home and the decorations were down and Emma was asleep in her crib, Becca and I sat on her small balcony watching the city lights. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. Choosing me over him? I didn't answer right away. I thought about Dylan as a baby, how I'd held him the same way I now held Emma, how I'd loved him with that fierce, protective love that makes you think you can shield your child from everything. I thought about the moment that love stopped being enough, when I'd realized I couldn't save him from himself. No, I finally said. I regret that I didn't see it sooner. I regret that I taught him the wrong lessons by staying silent about what his father did. I regret that my fear made me complicit. But choosing you, helping you escape, that's the best thing I've done in years. Maybe in my whole life. Becca leaned her head on my shoulder. I'm glad you did. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. We sat there as the night deepened, and the city hummed its endless song, and I thought about how the story could have ended so differently. How Becca could have stayed, enduring night after night of torture, until something inside her broke beyond repair, or until Dylan went too far, and she didn't survive. How Emma might have grown up, watching her father hurt her mother, learning those same terrible patterns, continuing the cycle. But that's not what happened. We stopped it, we broke the chain, and now Emma would grow up knowing only love. That has to count for something. That has to matter. I'm 72 now. Emma is 7, all long legs and missing teeth and endless questions. She calls me Grandma Maggie, and every Sunday, we have tea parties where we drink juice from fancy cups, and I tell her stories about when I was young. Not the hard stories. Not yet. Someday, when she's older, Becca will tell her the truth about her father. But for now, we let her be a child. Let her live in that golden bubble where the biggest problem is whether she'll get dessert or have to go to bed on time. Dylan remarried. I heard it through the grapevine. Some younger woman, who apparently doesn't know his history. I wanted to warn her, but Michael advised against it. You did your part, he said. You can't save everyone. I know he's right, but I think about her sometimes, whoever she is, and I hope she's luckier than Becca. I hope he learned. I hope he changed. But I don't count on it. Last week Emma asked me, Grandma, why don't I have a daddy like the other kids? Becca and I had prepared for this, rehearsed our answers. Still, my heart clenched. You do have a daddy, Becca said gently. But sometimes grown-ups can't live together, and that's okay. What matters is that you're loved, and you are, sweetheart. So loved. By you and Grandma Maggie? By us. And by so many people. Emma thought about this, her face serious. Then she shrugged. Okay. Can we play now? And just like that, it was enough. Because kids are resilient in ways we forget. They adapt. They accept. They move on. It's us adults who carry the weight, and maybe that's how it should be. I won't live forever. My knees ache more these days, and my doctors started using words like managing rather than curing. But I'm not afraid. I've made my peace. When I'm gone, Emma will have Becca, and Becca will have the strength we built together. She'll tell Emma about her weird grandma, who lived in a senior facility, but came over constantly, who taught her to love books and fight for what's right and never ever accept cruelty in the name of love. And maybe Emma will remember, and maybe when she's grown and faces her own hard choices, she'll think of this story and know what to do. That's all we can hope for, really, that the lessons stick, that the love holds, that the next generation does better than we did. I think they will. I have to believe they will. Because that's what hope is, believing the future can be better than the past, even when the past tried its hardest to destroy us. And we're still here. Scarred but standing. Wounded but whole. Survivors. All of us. That's not nothing. That's everything.